The next economic policy tool at the disposal of policymakers is monetary policy. This type of policy is when a central bank or another agency governs the supply of money and interest rates in the economy in order to influence output, employment, and prices. This helps to control the cost of short-term borrowing as well as the inflation rate. In the United States, the Federal Reserve Board, or the Fed, manages our monetary policy. This agency is extremely powerful and is purposely meant to be independent from the politics of the country. We don't want monetary policy to be governed by or approved by anyone. As such, funding for the Fed is not appropriated by Congress. Although members of the board are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate, they have very long terms, allowing them to run over multiple administrations and many sessions of Congress. We want these members to essentially be apolitical because they have a drastic impact on the economy. The next policy tool that policymakers can use is tax policy, where they're concerned with revenue generation. As such, this is highly political, and the policymakers must consider several different variables before they apply taxes. First is collectability, or the ease of collecting the taxes that you administer. You can think about this in terms of the evaluative criteria of administrative feasibility. Can you actually go about collecting the taxes which you put in place? The next is the idea of fiscal neutrality. Basically, whether the system gives preference to one kind or another of revenue or expenditure. Take, for example, tax loopholes. These are not neutral. Tax loopholes can distort economic behavior. Often when we consider fiscal neutrality, we're concerned with the economic criteria of equity. Next is the idea of buoyancy. Basically, does the tax keep up with inflation and economic growth? We think about the evaluative criteria of efficiency here. Further, we're concerned with distributive effects, or the impact of the tax on different groups in the population. Here, we're also concerned with equity. Next, policymakers are concerned with visibility, or the acceptability by the general public of the policy. This concerns both the political and the social feasibility. Finally, we're concerned with the equity of the policy, in particular, the vertical and horizontal equity. Think about this in terms of income stratification. Certain groups or individuals may be more impacted by the tax put in place. To understand the variable of equity, we have to understand the highly political nature of tax policy. It leads us to the question of how we tax, who gets taxed, and for what. We break taxes down in the country into two different types, regressive taxation versus progressive taxation. The way to think about these is more so about the idea of who does the burden of the taxation fall upon. Regressive taxes are those where we all pay the same regardless of our income. Take, for example, the sales tax. If the richest person in the country and the poorest person in the country both went into a convenience store and bought a soda, they both would pay the exact same price and pay the exact same sales tax on that can or bottle of soda. Yet this brings up the issue of fairness. Is a regressive tax fair? Well, to understand this, we have to think back to the idea of burden. Who does the largest burden of a sales tax fall upon? The rich individual or the poor individual in this case? Well, to understand this, we need to think about their incomes. Well, they're both essentially like a pie. Obviously, the rich individual has a larger pie than the poor individual. Yet, those pies can be broken up into the same proportions. Thus, when we think about their income, we think about saving versus spending behavior. Who saves more, the rich or the poor? Typically, the rich tend to save more than the poor do. So, if we took those pies for each of the individuals and broke them up into essentially slices, you pull one slice out. For the poor individual, that one slice you pull out of it equals essentially what they can save out of their paycheck in a given month. The whole rest of that pie is what they're spending. Yet, if you took one slice out of that pie for the rich individual, that slice of pie effectively is what they're spending out of their paycheck each month. The rest, however, is savings. Beyond these economic policy tools, there's a grab bag of other things the government can try to do to influence the economy. Everything from regulations, all the way through incentives, subsidies, and supporting various businesses, industries, and individuals.